right, guys. One sec. Let's see how I look real quick. All right, the framing is good. Step up the power cord. Whew. Okay. Let me pull up my chat. Oop. Pause this. All right, guys. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat. I realize the World Cup semifinals are still going, but I am dedicated to the cause. So, if you guys are still watching that, I totally understand. But I figure some guys might not be, so I'll go ahead and get live there. So, let me know if you can hear me and see me okay, and we'll go ahead and get this going. So, also let me know where you're checking in from. It's pretty cool to see kind of all the different places that you guys are watching from. So that's always fun. Let's see. All right, cool. Looks like framing is good. Y'all let me know if the audio is good. All right, cool. Henry Howe's audio is good. All right, what's going on, everybody? Hopefully you're having a good week so far. So I'm going to kind of try to start doing these live streams on weeks where I don't have videos. I don't think I'm going to do the whole weekly live streaming thing. It's just a little bit too much for me to kind of stay on top of. But I think, at this point, I'm kind of doing 3 videos a month. So I usually kind of have 3 weeks on and 1 week off just because some of the stuff I build is just bigger and takes more time. So I think doing, a live stream on that week where I don't have a new project video would be fun. So hopefully you guys agree. And so let me go ahead and check out where you guys are coming in from. Ricky from England, I'm sure you're watching the game, man, so can't blame you there. Taco Bike from the Netherlands, Ashley from Connecticut. We got Montreal, we got Iraq, got Los Angeles, Michigan, Oklahoma, Orange County, North Carolina. That's awesome, man. Nova Scotia, North Carolina again. Ontario, man, you guys are from all over the place. This is super cool, super cool. So hopefully, if you guys have any questions for me, just let me know. I figured we'd talk a little bit about home renovation this week. So I am currently working on my first ever home renovation project, really kind of in general, but definitely the first home renovation project for the channel. And I'm going to be installing some flooring in a guest bedroom in our kind of finished basement space here. And it's essentially going to be similar to what the guys did over at the Maker Ranch, Benueta and Mike Montgomery over there, and Jesse, Ben's sister. Basically, they set up a room that allowed them to get those kind of nice intro, outro, final shots without having to move a bunch of furniture around in their house. They can keep consistent lighting set up there. So I'm essentially doing the same thing. So I'm going to be putting in laminate flooring. It's a basement bedroom, as I mentioned, so it's on a concrete slab. So that's a little bit limiting as far as what I can actually do with the space. I could either basically do engineered or laminate. Went with laminate just because it's a little easier to install. The room doesn't see a lot of use or wear, so laminate should be totally fine for the space. But also painted the walls a nice kind of light gray. Got some lights that I'm going to be putting in there. So I'm really excited to get that space set up. It's going to be a lot easier for me to kind of get those final shots because up until now, I've been using our back patio for those, and you guys probably have seen like kind of the rocks in the background of a lot of my final shots, and that's my back patio. But as you might have seen a few weeks ago, I built that pergola and added that outdoor dining table to that back patio space. And so with the addition of that pergola, basically that's creating a ton of shadows and stuff, so it's just not a good space to take those final pictures anymore. Also, that totally relied on weather. If it was raining, if it had even rained earlier that day, a lot of times that would make things look weird out there. It was also super bright, obviously, usually during the day, so it's kind of hard to control light and especially get that nice shallow depth of field that we're always looking for. So I figured having a space inside our house that was kind of dedicated to this would be great, and that guest bedroom kind of fits the bill. But as I mentioned, it's a bedroom, so typically there is a bed in there. And so what I'm going to be doing to solve that is actually going to be adding a Murphy bed to that room as well. I'm using a Rockler kit, so that'll be pretty cool. Never done a Murphy bed before, but their kits make it pretty simple, it seems like at least. And that way I can have the bed kind of folded up against the wall at all times, except when we have guests. And so that way it'll be out of my way on a wall that won't be kind of the main wall I'm using for these kind of photos and videos. And The other nice thing is this room is directly off of my shop, so I only have to move the pieces of furniture like 15 feet, and then they'll be in the room and ready to go. So really excited. So hopefully you guys will enjoy the flooring install video. I think that'll be kind of cool. But then also the Murphy bed project, which will be coming up, I guess, in like 2 or 3 weeks. So yeah, so let me dive back into the live chat here. I really hate how this thing skips down. It is like one of my biggest pet peeves about the live chat. So okay, we got people from Russia, Sweden, Iowa, Netherlands, Minnesota, Pakistan, Italy, England, Mexico. Holy crap, man! You guys are from everywhere. That is awesome. TJ's Woodworking, what's going on, man? How you doing? Nashville, awesome guys. Georgia, Jamaica. Wow, man, this is crazy. That's cool. So yeah, it looks like some of you guys have done some home renovation stuff as well. Brent, it looks like you did a whole complete house flip. That's nuts, man. That's impressive. It's kind of interesting because I feel really comfortable building stuff in the shop, furniture and that kind of thing. But when it comes to home renovation, I'm really new to it. So even framing out a wall and putting up drywall, doing basic electrical, that's all stuff that's like really new to me. So it's skills that I'm hoping to hone over the next couple months because I've got an even bigger kind of home reno project. Actually, it's our attic space. I mentioned this, I think, in my last live stream, but we have a really big attic space here at this house. This house was modular instead of stick built, so basically it seemed like the third floor was like an option, basically. So it's got a finished staircase up to the third floor, doorway and all that stuff. And then you walk into the attic and you've got subfloor. The walls are kind of basically framed out. It's got basic electrical. It's even got a little bit of, I think, water run. I noticed the PEX pipe running up there. So it's kind of ready to be finished. And so for me, that would, I think, be a great office space. It's kind of on a separate level, especially now that I've got the kid and all that stuff. So I think it's going to be a cool project to get some of that space finished. Still trying to figure out exactly what I'm going to do. I know I've already got the floor covered. Got some really nice solid oak flooring. That's going to be pretty cool. That'll be another video since that's a different type of flooring. They're very different when it comes to installation between laminate and hardwood. But then I'm also probably going to do something like a shiplap wall. I think I'm still trying to decide. I kind of want to avoid drywall. That seems like a miserable process based on everybody I've ever talked to about it. So I'd kind of like to avoid that, and I just like the way shiplap looks, especially in kind of an attic space like that where you are going to have that kind of angled ceilings because it's right up against the roof, and you've got kind of the shorter knee walls towards the edges of the room. I think kind of those lines running horizontally across the entire room will hopefully give it a sense of kind of more space and make it feel bigger. So I think that'll be kind of cool. I'm also debating on putting a bathroom up there. I really don't know if I want to tackle that because that adds a whole nother set of challenges with water and all that kind of stuff, and probably tile work and all the things that go along with a bathroom. But that would be nice and probably add more value to the home if I did that. So I don't know. We'll see. Still ironing out the details, but pretty excited about that. I actually already have all the flooring I need for the space. It's about 400 square feet of solid oak flooring. So that was a pretty big expense that I got kind of dealt with. Armstrong Flooring went ahead and provided the flooring for the build. So pretty excited about that. But anyway, yeah, let's dive back in to the live chat. Let's see here. So Candon Fish asks, where do I usually get my lumber? So kind of a variety of places. Actually, before we move forward, I'm going to go ahead and crack a beer. I've already got my LaCroix going for, hydration purposes, but it is 4:10. I think that's late enough to get started with a beer. So I've got this guy from Blackberry Farm who actually visited. They're just kind of in the Knoxville, Tennessee area. But this is their IPA Coyote Tactics. I haven't had this one before. I've had a lot of their beers. They usually do kind of bigger bottles, very traditional kind of Belgian style stuff. And I just saw this. I was in Knoxville this weekend visiting a buddy of mine over there hanging out. Actually went mountain biking with him. Actually got a terrible case of poison ivy, which you might see on my arm. But also picked up a couple beers while I was over there. So interested to try this. Hopefully you guys are cracking a beer at home. Let's go ahead and dive in. Nice. That's a good one. Nice. That's real tasty. All right. So anyway, Candon Fish. Where do I usually get my lumber? So really depends on the project. So If it's a plywood project, a lot of times I'll use Pure Bond because I think the price to quality ratio is very good. Full disclosure, they've been a sponsor of mine in the past, and I've got a few more sponsored projects with them in the future. But that being said, I just really like their stuff. I've paid for it myself even when they haven't sponsored projects. So that should tell you that I actually like the stuff. This whole French cleat wall behind me is Pure Bond. I bought all that plywood, that kind of thing. So I think at about $50 a sheet for 3/4 inch plywood, it's a very good kind of price to quality ratio. As I said, if I need to get some of the more interesting like veneered plywoods, like walnut veneer, then I'll usually have to go to my local lumber dealer, which I have a few of here, but the one that covers the one that carries the most plywood is Jeanette Lumber here in Asheville. They've got all kinds of plywood. They've got tons of hardwoods, domestic hardwoods. They don't have a much of an exotic selection, so if I'm looking for that kind of thing, I'll typically go to Asheville Hardware, which is kind of they kind of specialize in slabs. If I ever mention my slab dealer in my videos, which I've done in a couple of my videos, that's Asheville Hardware. They're a great shop here in Asheville, but they carry some woodworking tools and things like that, finishes and that kind of stuff. But they also have a huge selection of slabs and carry some lumber, kind of more specializing in kind of exotic stuff. So if I need anything like that, I'll usually get that from Asheville Hardware. Like I used some Babinga for those floating shelves I built a while back. I got that from Asheville Hardware, that kind of thing. So yeah, most of my lumber I'm going to be getting from lumber dealers because I don't really work with a lot of southern yellow pine or 2x4s or the stuff that's going to be available at the home center. Not to say that that stuff isn't good. I mean, I built that that kind of modern farmhouse coffee table, I guess like a month or so ago, and that top was all southern yellow pine, and that's actually sitting right behind the camera. But that turned out really nice. I think southern yellow pine, if you can get it in your area, is definitely one of the best kind of price to strength and looks ratios you can get in lumber, because a 2x8 or 2x10 is going to be so cheap board footage wise that you can really afford to make mistakes and kind of learn how to do things without getting so worried if you were using something like walnut or cherry or even more expensive exotic stuff. So yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. Usually from lumber dealers, but occasionally from the big box stores. Let's see. So old school repair shop asks, I worked with Seth's Bike Hacks on the truck bed camper. How hard was it to make? Is there any way to hook up a solar panel and a charging system to it? So it was a pretty easy project. I mean, that being said, I have a lot of tools at my disposal, so that definitely makes things easier, generally speaking. But I definitely made that more complicated than it needed to be. It was basically just a triangular box with a big kind of door on the front. So that's a pretty simple one to build, I think. And then as far as solar, I would look into something like I know Goal Zero makes a lot of solar products. I wouldn't go install a huge solar panel on the roof of your truck or anything like that, but some of those kind of more backpacking style products would probably be a really good option if you're doing just a 1 or 2 day camp out and want to just keep like your phone and laptop and that kind of stuff charged. So I think it'd be pretty easy. Let's see. Coleman Stevens, as someone who works out of a garage shop with neighbors close by, how do I deal with sound? So feels bad when running his table saw past 8 p.m. on a weekday. So I kind of have the luxury of, one, not having neighbors so close that they're bothered by the sound of my shop. I mean, I pretty much have my garage doors closed at all times because I do have a mini split in here. So I've got kind of the AC running, and if I had the garage doors open, that would let in all the heat, obviously. So try to keep those closed. That helps immensely with the sound. And then outside of that, I don't really know what to tell you. I mean, to me, woodworking tools, for the most part, aren't really that loud. It's kind of this like low-level, solid-state hum. Usually, like the table saw, dust collector, planer, jointer, really all of the big stationary machines are kind of this hum rather than, a really annoying, like if somebody's doing construction or like reshingling a roof or something like that. Those noises are typically a lot more annoying because it's like loud banging and just like abrupt noises that can really grate on you. Whereas I think woodworking tools, for the most part, unless you're like chopping mortises with a chisel and mallet, I think generally speaking they're pretty solid state kind of hum noise. But I don't know. I mean, besides keeping your garage door closed, I'm not sure there are a ton of other great options. I mean, you could add some insulation, um, some sort of wall covering, that kind of thing. Actually, the Wood Talk podcast just talked about this in their last episode. It was more trying to isolate noise from the shop and I guess the person's nursery who was above the shop. So they were trying to figure out how to make that a little bit quieter. And they had some recommendations. I think Wood Talk episode 3, they talked about some soundproofing stuff. So maybe we'll want to go check that out. But unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of that problem. So let's see. So Hassan from Pakistan asked what basic tools I would recommend. And so I actually have a video on that. If you look in kind of my past list of videos, it's just 5 basic woodworking tools for beginners. And that video, I think, covers the 5 tools that I really recommend anybody starting out woodworking go ahead and buy, because they're super useful even if you eventually upgrade those tools, to go ahead and have those. And the tools were circular saw, jigsaw, drill, and impact driver. I kind of included those as one because usually you can get those as a set. And then a router and a random orbit sander. And with those kind of 5 tools, you could build pretty much anything I've built on this shop, pretty much anything I've built on this channel, rather. The one thing that you wouldn't be able to do is mill rough lumber, but to get around that, you could just go ahead and buy it pre-milled, which is available at most lumber dealers. They'll mill it for you. So again, with those 5 tools, that's going to unlock a lot of options, and then that way you can kind of get comfortable on those tools and continue to save. I think probably the next tool I'd recommend after that set would definitely be the table saw. That's kind of the next, I think, achievement level in woodworking. That table saw is going to allow you to make a lot more precise cuts on, especially things like sheet goods and things like that. Also, maybe the miter saw, but I think if you bought a good table saw and built a solid crosscut sled, you could do most of what you could do with a miter saw. So, but definitely go check out that video. I kind of explain more in depth about those 5 tools and some of the accessories that I also recommend with those tools to kind of get the most out of them. So, Abraham asks, can I recommend any small or easy projects? I've got some on my channel for sure. The patio cooler I just built a couple weeks ago was super simple. That was built with basically just a circular saw and drill. The plywood sofa I built a little while back, that was a really simple one. A lot of these projects can be built simply, especially if you buy pre-milled lumber like I kind of just mentioned, because that, to me, I think that's the thing that I think people get hung up on a lot of times when they're watching my videos. They see these big planers and jointers and they think, oh well, I cannot build that myself for sure. But really, if you just buy the lumber pre-milled, you can skip all that, honestly save yourself a ton of time, and just get right to building. So I think most of the projects I have on my channel could be simplified and made more accessible. All right, man, we got people checking in from all over the place. Denmark, Kurdistan, California, Sweden, Colorado, Chile, all that. Man, you guys are from all over the place. Bearded Mountain Biker says, he did a kitchen remodel. Nice. Yeah, I would do that, but the house we bought here, it doesn't really need any remodeling. It's relatively new. It's super basic. It doesn't necessarily fit my style, but like everything is good quality for the most part. So it kind of feels weird to spend money to replace that stuff when it doesn't really need to be replaced. So I'm almost hoping if we move from this house to get one that requires maybe just a little bit more fixing up, just so I can kind of get that experience. But anyway, let's see. What else we got? Man, this chat skipping is so annoying. Let's see. So Bearded Mountain Bikers asking if anyone in the chat ever sealed drywall. If you guys have, definitely let them know. So Brad Agdern asks, he wants to do some backyard building and has been looking for reasonable prices on cedar. Have you found any ways to get bulk discounting or contractor preferred pricing? So yeah, I was actually shocked with how expensive cedar was. So I had to buy those 4x4s for the pergola kit that I did in my video. And it was 4 8-foot long pergola, or 4 8-foot long 4x4s and 4 12-foot long 4x4s. and those 8 boards were like $450, which I was shocked at how expensive that was. I was kind of under the impression that cedar was a little bit cheaper, but I guess it wasn't. And that was from a local kind of more contractor centric company. It's 84 Lumber. They sell mostly to, construction companies and things like that, not as much to end consumers like me. And so I was expecting that to be, on the cheaper side, and it definitely wasn't. So I don't have any other great uh, ideas for getting that stuff cheaper. I mean, honestly, I think cedar, like fence posts and things like that, at the big box stores are going to be pretty cheap, depending on what exactly you're looking to build. If you don't need stuff that's as thick, that's a pretty good way to go. It usually has one rough side, but if you have a planer, you could easily zip that off, or if depending on what you're building, you can just face that rough side, towards the bottom or inside or whatever, and totally get away with that. So let's see what else we got. Ice Cold Snowman says he found a local lumber yard that has a great deal on coastal redwood. Yes, is it any good? I've only used redwood once. There's actually some really old fencing material, oddly enough, that we were just talking about that. But my dad salvaged it from his neighbor who was taking down a fence years and years ago, like 20 plus years ago. And I used it on some beer flight paddles. It was one of the first woodworking videos on my channel, probably in the first 5. You can go back and watch those. It's pretty funny to go back that far and watch. But it's super soft. It's kind of similar to cedar, so I maybe wouldn't want it for like a tabletop or something like that, because I think it just get dinged up really easily. But I think it makes good outdoor furniture. I think it's similar to cedar in that way. It'd be great for some Adirondack chairs, things like that. Maybe things that don't have a ton of wear and tear on the surface. I think that'd be a good option for sure. Let's see. So Brina D says she hasn't found many places in Oklahoma that sells the good stuff. She'd love to build with Purple Heart. So if you guys have any Oklahoma recommendations for Brina, definitely recommend those to her in the chat. Let's see. Taco Bike, thank you for asking everybody to leave a like. That would be great if you guys want to go ahead and like this live chat so everybody gets to see this. All right, so Dylan, he's recently become the woodworking leader for a local 4-H club. Any tips or simple project ideas for first-time woodworking students? So I think I covered that a little bit earlier, but I would say, get a basic tool set. I think those 5 tools I recommended would be a great starting point. And then another thing I might add to that list, and another kind of accessory I mentioned in that video I have, would be either something like the Craig jig, so you can do pocket hole joinery, or something like a dowel jig, like Rockler sells, or any of the places that sell dowel jigs. And that's going to allow you to do some better joinery, some more hidden joinery, rather than all exposed screws and butt joints and that kind of thing. And I think those 2 accessories would allow you to do some really nice kind of furniture products. So I think, a basic coffee table or end table, that kind of thing, 4 legs, maybe some aprons around, underneath the tabletop, and then a basic tabletop. And that's a pretty easy project, especially if you're buying pre-milled lumber, and they're going to have this nice functional piece at the end of it that I think they'll be super proud of. So I would definitely recommend that. Personally, I think working with plywood is a great way to start, because it's kind of this fixed entity. You don't have to really worry about milling it or anything like that. You just kind of cut it up into the shapes you want. You don't have to worry about wood movement, and then you can just kind of glue it all together, and it will look pretty nice. I personally really like the way all plywood projects look. So those are maybe some tips. Also, I would just get them watching videos and things like that on woodworking. I mean, I think that's how I learned most of what I know. So if you can get them into watching that kind of content, go back and watch old Wood Whisperer videos, and Bob from I Like to Make Stuff, and all the classics, David Picciuto, Jimmy DiResta, all the guys who kind of have been at this for 3, 4, 5 years. In Mark's case, like 10 years. You can really get a lot of free knowledge in that kind of back catalog on YouTube if they're so inclined, and that would definitely give them a head start, so they would at least know what tools are and kind of basics on how to use them, and what they're used for, and that kind of stuff. So let's see. Let me, man, This thing keeps jumping down. Sorry. Um, so Ice Cold Snowman asks, he's thinking of getting a palm router. So should he get a cheap one off of eBay or a mid-range one? Um, to me, a palm router is a super, super useful tool. I think I would definitely invest in a good quality palm router. I know, I think especially when you're just starting out, a palm router could almost do the job of a kind of regular sized router, and it's a little bit easier to handle. Um, you're probably not going to be using the router for things like big dados or mortises and that kind of thing when you're just starting out. So I think a trim router. I really like the DeWalt trim router. I have that one. I've used it quite a bit, and I think that would be one that I would definitely recommend. So let's see. Um, all right, Ministry of Dice. What would you recommend for the first table saw? Uh, so that's a tough one too. I think I really that is going to depend largely on your budget. I think if it's your first table saw, it's probably going to be in the contractor or job site line of table saws. So there's a big spectrum of price ranges there. I think from like $200 to close to 1,000, depending on what model you're looking at. I know DeWalt makes one that's kind of around $300 that I've used a good bit, and it makes good quality cuts. It's pretty easy to set up. They have a really good fence on it. That's the thing I like the best about that saw. A lot of saws in that kind of price range are going to have kind of a crappy fence that is going to be hard to get square and that kind of thing. So I really like the rack and pinion system that DeWalt uses for their fence. I haven't used a lot of other job site saws. I know obviously Ryobi has one that's really inexpensive, but it seems like their fence might be a little bit iffy. If you've got a little more money to spend, DeWalt has a nicer one. That's the one I actually started with. It's around 550 or $600. It's got a stand built in. It's got more kind of rip capacity, so you can rip wider boards. Get like sheets of plywood and that stuff on it. I actually built the entire J Bates miter saw station with that job site saw from DeWalt. If you go back and watch that video series on my channel, so that's a very capable saw. And then kind of towards the top range of those job site saws is kind of the SawStop version, which I've heard really good things about. I know Chris Salmoni just got one. I've not personally used it, but I have their cabinet saw. It's really good quality. So obviously it has the safety mechanism built in, which is kind of nice. So you've kind of got a wide range there depending on your budget. So that hopefully is a pretty good overview. Yeah, and a lot of people are recommending looking for used stuff. I definitely agree with that. Buying used, you could probably get an older cabinet saw like a Delta Unisaw or something like that, old Powermatic for around the price of some of those contractor saws new. And any cabinet saw is going to be better than a contractor saw, I think, for the most part. So Rigid has one kind of in that in between price range that I've heard good things about. I know Matt Cremona used to use it, and you can find those used for pretty dang cheap. So you've got a lot of options out there for sure. Let's see. Rangy69, just want to say, love your clips. Currently building a French cleat system in my garage. Thanks for the inspiration from New Zealand. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. The French cleat, as you guys can probably tell, I absolutely love. This thing is so useful for organization, and it just happens to make a really great backdrop for these videos. So, Francisco asked what kind of inspires me for my creation. So, I get inspiration from a lot of different places. I'm kind of constantly watching YouTube and kind of watching other people in this community, and definitely get a lot of ideas from other people's videos. That's an awesome source of inspiration. Also, Instagram. I follow a ton of people on there. That's a super visual platform, so it's really easy just to kind of scroll through your feed and see new posts come up that just trigger that one little idea. It's not necessarily copying that project, but just maybe one facet of that project that looks interesting to you. Instagram's a great way to do that. I think Pinterest to me is kind of in the same vein. If I'm working on something, designing something coming up, a lot of times I'll go to Pinterest and just type in, modern whatever I'm building and kind of see what comes up. And a lot of times I'll pull some design elements from a lot of different pieces that I find there. And it's really, really useful and makes designing a lot easier for sure. Let's see. Um, so somebody asked, what would I recommend for starter hand tools? So I'm probably going to do a video on that here soon because I think that's definitely another thing to cover. For me, I would probably recommend a couple of good chisels. Really only probably need 3 or 4 sizes. You don't need a full set, and probably definitely don't need mortising chisels unless you're planning on chopping a lot of mortises by hand. Then on top of that, I'd probably also get a good Japanese pull saw. Those are super useful for flush trimming and doing quick cross cutting and that kind of stuff by hand. And then probably a block plane and low angle jack plane. And I think for a power tool woodworker who is looking to add some hand tools to their collection, those are two great planes. The block plane is awesome for flushing up in grain, adding kind of chamfers to pieces. I actually really prefer using a block plane over a router in a lot of cases just because it's a lot less mess, it's quieter, just something really satisfying about it. So block plane is great for that. And then the jack plane, as its name implies, it's kind of the jack of all trades. It can do a whole lot. You can do some basic flattening, some basic smoothing, joint the edges of boards, things like that. It's not going to be as great as a dedicated smoothing plane or a dedicated jointing plane, but it is still going to get a lot of those jobs done. And you can have just one plane for the job. And especially if you get a couple different blades, maybe with different angles and that kind of thing, you can make that a really versatile plane. So I'm trying to think outside of those things what I might recommend. It really depends on what you're planning on doing. If you're going to be cutting a lot of dovetails by hand, you'll probably need a set of dividers. You'll probably want some kind of dovetail saw. I mean, you could probably get away with the Japanese saw for that, although you'd want one with different kind of teeth, not crosscut teeth, but rip teeth. You'd also want a coping saw to kind of cut out the bulk of the waste on the dovetails. And then something like a marking gauge or a really good pencil, I guess, to mark your lines. So it really depends what you want to make, though, for sure. Let's see. Mountain Bike Advice asked me, do deck joists needs to be 16 inches on cinder, or is it different for a deck? I don't know. I've never built a deck, so I definitely do some research elsewhere on that. PK Narc asks, I used to do a lot of work with Ipe, mostly used for benches and such. Do I use it often? I've only ever used it that once for the outdoor dining table I built a few weeks ago. It was definitely some pretty tough wood, but it looked awesome. That table came out beautiful. It is unbelievably heavy though. So it's pretty expensive here in the States. I don't know where you're based, but I probably won't use it a ton, but I think is pretty ideal for outdoor stuff. Obviously, tons of decks and things like that are built out of Ipe. So let's see. Frank's DIY. He's refinishing his trailer. Looked at pressure treated plywood. Crazy expensive. Yeah, man. All that stuff is really, really expensive. You might be able to find kind of sheathing grade plywood, but usually that stuff is really ugly. So I would have a hard time using that on the outside of something. It's usually pretty rough looking. Let's see. Oh, trail features. What's going on, man? Welcome to the live stream. He wishes it was beer o'clock in Colorado. Yeah, man, you're a couple hours behind, I guess, but you'll be there soon. Let's see. So Richard Thomas asks, beside the safety, are the saw stop table saws worth it versus a Grizzly or something like that? So I don't know. That's a hard one because I think obviously the big selling point on the saw stop is the safety. Hold on, let me take a sip here. I have bought 2 saw stops in my time. I bought one that was 110 volt, and then later sold it and upgraded to a 220 volt once I kind of had that power run in my shop, and that's what I currently have. It's 3 horsepower ICS. It was very expensive. It's the most expensive tool I think I've purchased, but for me, I'm working at home by myself in my shop like 90% of the time. So uh, to have that kind of little insurance policy that I'm not going to cut any of my digits off, that was worth it for me. Now, that is a choice you need to make. Obviously, I've never come close to even nicking one of my fingers. So, if you practice good safety, you can probably avoid that in your lifetime. But there's always the potential for that. There's always the potential for that moment where you're tired and maybe you got something else on your mind and you're just doing something that you're not paying attention. And it could happen. It happens to a lot of people who are good, talented woodworkers, because you get complacent, especially after you've used a tool like that over and over and over again. You get sometimes maybe a little too comfortable with it. So that's totally a personal call. I think for me, I don't see myself not having a saw stop at any point moving forward, and that's coming from somebody who has Powermatic as one of my main sponsors. So I think that's probably saying something, that I value it so much that I would not get another Powermatic saw for free just to keep the saw stop. So I do think it's a pretty valuable technology, especially for somebody like me, again, who works by myself most of the time. But that's kind of personal call. I think the saws are great quality. Out of the cabinet saws I've used, it's definitely the best I've tried. I did get a chance to try a Grizzly saw while I was at Chris Salamone's house in California, and that it was definitely not as nice, but that's reflected in the price point. So really just depends on your budget. Let's see. Harvey, I only just joined, so I have no idea what you're talking about, but I love the videos. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. All right, Danny Graham, looking to put barn doors that could both slide to the same side of a closet into a small bedroom. So any suggestions for hardware or design? So that's a tricky one. So typically barn doors are going to kind of meet in the middle and not slide past each other. So I don't know a ton about barn door hardware. I'm actually going to be building a sliding barn door for some friends of mine, but it's going to be a single door that basically slides out of the way when it's not in use and slides back to cover the door when it is in use. So I'm sure there's hardware out there for it. I know Rockler definitely specializes in a lot of barn door hardware, so you might want to look there. And also there's a lot of DIY options out there. A lot of people who've done DIY barn door stuff, so you might want to check into that as well. Let's see. Matthias, hardware store sold me 3 pieces of ash, 2x2 and maybe 2 feet long for $70. I don't know, is that 2x2 meters, or I don't know what. You're not in the U.S. it seems like, so I'm not sure 2x2 what, but if it's 2 inches by 2 inches by 2 feet long for $70, that would definitely be pretty expensive. Ash is one of the cheaper hardwoods I can get here in the U.S. It's about $3 a board foot, which a board foot would be 1 inches thick by 12 inch wide by 12 inches long. So that's a board foot in kind of volume. So that would be $3 where I buy my lumber here in the U.S. So that seems a little expensive, but I don't know what 2x2 measurement you're talking about. So yeah. Let's see. So Mads, I just got a workbench. What would I recommend for cheap tools? So I don't know. It really depends. If you want to go super cheap, I wouldn't recommend necessarily just buying cheap tools. I'd recommend looking for used tools, because usually you can get better tools for a similar price point as kind of the cheaper tools, and they're going to last you a longer period of time. So I would look for garage sales and things like that in your area, Craigslist, depending on where you're at, and that should be good for you to be able to find some kind of less expensive stuff for sure. So Scott Fox, he says he loves his saw stop cabinet saw for the precision. Yeah, I like mine too for that. And his first project was my computer desk, but he inlaid a glass top into it. That's awesome, Scott. I would love to see a picture of that. If you want to shoot me an email through my website or DM me on Instagram or whatever, that sounds really cool, man. I really considered doing that when I built that piece, but the guy I built it for didn't want glass for whatever reason, so we just went with a solid wood top. But that sounds pretty cool. SB3 Star 19, what are my favorite French cleat holders and what are the easiest to make? So I think for me, probably the ones that are the most useful are probably the clamp racks, which are probably just out of frame here, but if you go watch my French cleat video, you'll see kind of how I built those. It's just really easy to get clamps on and off. I guess I have more of them right here. I don't know if you can see those, but basically I just set the spacing so you can easily slide these in and out, and it's a lot easier than my old system and keeps them nicely organized. This little plane shelf is pretty nice though. It looks good. It's nice to kind of have the planes on display. It makes you feel like a pretty legit woodworker. And they're obviously really easy to access. You just lift them on and off. And I made sure to countersink any of the screws well below the wooden surface so they wouldn't ding up the plane blades. The mallet holder is really nice. The chisel holder is nice. I mean, really, all this stuff works super well. So I don't think any of them are necessarily that much harder to make than the others. It really just depends on the tools you have. So let's see. So I got a couple of people asking, what did I do before YouTube? I want to make in Taco Bike. So I used to work for a cigar company, Drew Estate, and I did their digital marketing. So when I started there, I was the only person doing the digital marketing. They had like a really old Flash website and basically no social media whatsoever. So I kind of rebuilt the website, started doing blog posts for them, kind of, traditional content marketing. And this was probably 10 years ago now. So it's kind of a little bit ahead of the curve there. But then also built up their social media following on Facebook and Twitter, and then eventually Instagram once that kind of came into play, and built that to one of the larger followings in the cigar industry, or at least it was before I left. And that was really where I learned how to do a lot of this stuff. I mean, I went to school. I got a bachelor's in business administration. There's a gnat here. So that kind of prepared me for the business world in general, but I got a concentration in computer information systems, which is basically IT. So I didn't have any real education, especially on like social media or web design or anything like that. So I kind of learned all that stuff on my own. I had a cigar blog before I actually started working for the cigar company. That's how I ended up meeting the owner and getting the job. But so all that stuff I just kind of learned mostly through trial and error, and just kind of trying to make things work and seeing what worked and what didn't. And if I broke the website, Googling around to figure out how to fix it. And so that's how I honed a lot of the things that I use every day now. We had a couple video series on the YouTube channel at Drew Estate. I did a cigar and basically alcohol pairing. So we did like spirits and craft beer and stuff like that, and paired them with our cigars and kind of just talked about them on camera. And it was super fun. I really enjoyed my time there. But I've always wanted to kind of own my own business and run my own business. So once I started kind of making these woodworking videos on the side on YouTube, I kind of figured I could make this work as a living. And so I kind of went all in super early. I mean, I think I only had like 5,000 subscribers when I quit. But I was really pretty confident that I could make this work as a business. And it definitely has. So I'm really happy that I kind of took that leap, and my wife was super supportive. She was actually the one who really encouraged me to quit when I did, and it's worked out really, really well. So couldn't be happier that I did that. But working for Drew Estate all those years definitely helped me kind of learn what I do now. So yeah. Let's see. All right. Hello from Argentina. All right. Nicholas, Milwaukee versus DeWalt, and then Taco Bike ads versus Festool. That really just, I think, largely depends on budget and also what you're doing. I think DeWalt and Milwaukee are much more targeted towards the job site guys, the general contractors who are doing heavier demolition work and more kind of rougher building, framing out houses and that kind of thing. Whereas Festool, I think, really is targeted more towards like the trim carpenters and finish carpenters of the world, where one of the big concerns is dust. I think that's the thing that Festool probably does the best, is dust control. So if you're working in somebody's home and you need to avoid getting dust everywhere, I think that's really where Festool comes into play. Also, generally speaking, the tools have a little bit more precision. So yeah, I think that's kind of the big differentiating factor for me. I use a lot of Festool stuff because I think it just works better in a lot of cases for what I do. I avoid dust like the plague, considering I do this day in and day out. Dust is obviously very bad for you. I'm working in an enclosed space, so if you're on a big job site in an open space and you can just sweep it or blow it off at the end of the day, dust doesn't matter as much, as long as you wear dust protection, that kind of thing. But in this enclosed space, any dust that is created during these projects, I got to do something with, whether that's vacuum it up or whatever, and that becomes a pain. So in that case, Festool really works well for me. This dang gnat. um, so Cordero Wordworks asks, when am I going to bring back the Crafted podcast? So I don't know that I'm going to. They rebranded, in case you don't know, to Creators Collective. So Zach and James are still going strong. They've added William Walker, who's another awesome YouTube kind of content creator, and it's still great. So definitely go support them. But I don't envision myself going back to the weekly podcast format anytime soon. It's a lot of work. So yeah. Nitro Max, what power tool and hand tool could I not be without? That's a tough one. Let me take a sip while I think about that. So I think probably power tool wise, I usually say the table saw, because it's, to me, probably one of the more versatile power tools in the shop. You can do a lot on it. You can break down huge sheets of plywood. You can cross-cut boards. You can do some joinery. There's just a lot you can do on it. So I'd probably say the table saw. That it kind of becomes the center of most woodworkers' shops over time. And then hand tool, that's a tough one. I mean, I think the hand tool I grab the most is the block plane, just because I'm not a huge hand tool user personally. So a lot of times that's to add a nice little chamfer on the edge and that kind of thing. So I would probably say the block plane. Although having a good sharp chisel comes in handy so frequently if you got a little ragged edge that you need to clean up, or there's just so many times where having a good chisel is useful. Also, like a Japanese pull saw or flush trim saw, those are super useful as well. So those are more than one, but there's a couple. Fred McIntyre, what's going on, man? How you doing? Simeon, student woodworking from Belgium, really enjoy watching your videos. Keep up the good work. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Let's see. Bruce, hey to Brazil. How's it going, man? It looks like we're getting some answers to the deck questions in the comments, so that's awesome. Mountain bike advice, I know you had asked about that. So Blake Weber, what's going on, man? Thanks. I'm glad you joined the stream. Let's see. Yeah, trail features. I'd rather have fewer good tools and a lot of tools that break. Totally agree, man. That's why I don't do much shopping at places like Harbor Freight and places like that, because to me, it's better to invest in a few quality tools and kind of add more to your collection as you need them than to, go crazy in the beginning and just buy one of everything in cheapest brand you can find, because likely you're not going to use all those tools. Not every tool that's sold out there is going to be something that's going to be useful for every woodworker. So you really need to figure out the style of stuff you build and kind of go from there. So let's see. Man, this skipping thing is annoying. Well, and spoiler alerts, but England lost. Man, that is crazy. Croatia advancing to the finals. That's pretty cool, man. I wish I had not missed that. It's a bummer for England because, man, it's been such a long time since they've been to the finals. But that's really cool for Croatia. Croatia versus France. That's going to be kind of cool. All right, Wood Shaped asks, how did I grow my channel so quickly? Do you feel like it's unique projects or content or your precise marketing, all of the above? You're great at interaction. I think that's awesome. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. But I don't know. It's hard to kind of quantify what causes a channel to grow quickly. I think one big thing is consistency. I have been putting out videos almost every week. I'm kind of at a 3 video a month schedule at this point, but that's almost every week for the past 2.5 years. So it's not like I've grown overnight. I've put out a lot of videos, and there were definitely a lot of flops in that time period. So especially early on, I think that's one of the hardest things to get through is those videos that you put a lot of effort into that then nobody watches. Like I built this set of Star Wars cornhole boards. This video, it killed me because I thought it was just going to skyrocket. And I spent all this time making this really cool Star Wars paint job and, really spent a lot of time on the thumbnail and made it all Star Wars themed, used the Star Wars font and all that stuff. and then like 2,000 people watched it, which it's still good, but in the grand scheme of things, I was really hoping that one was going to be a winner. So I think those early disappointments are the things that a lot of people stumble with and have a hard time getting past, both just emotionally and staying motivated and all that stuff, because it is hard when you pour all this time into it and then nobody watches the video. That's tough. But I think, to me, you got to see those as learning opportunities and practice. And if you just keep at it, it's almost impossible not to grow, in my opinion. Just keep it consistent. Also, keep your quality high. I also think that's a big factor. Just put a lot of effort into making the audio quality good, the video quality good, making it easy to follow, that kind of thing. And I think success will come with that. I mean, obviously, marketing is a big part of it. I share my videos a lot of places, social media, Instagram, Instructables, Reddit. I mean, all over the place. But in the beginning, it's kind of hard to get traction. So sharing is much more important, I think, than as you grow. Then you've got kind of this built-in audience, and they'll help to share it for you. So that almost becomes less necessary as you get bigger. But yeah, I think it's probably a combination of all those things. But I think quality and consistency are two of the most important by far. So, all right, let's see what else we got here. Quinn asks, "What is my favorite Oscar Blues beer?" That's a tough one. That depends on my mood. They've got their kind of Blue Dream IPA. It's in the blue can. I think it's called a Blue Dream, and that is one of my favorite beers from them. It's really inexpensive. We've got an Oscar Blues location here in Western North Carolina in Brevard, so I can get that stuff for like $14 for a 12 pack at the local Ingles, and that is a screaming deal to me when I'm paying for a lot of the beers I drink, like $18 for a 4 pack of Tall Boys. So that's a delicious beer. Also, their barrel aged 1050, which is their Imperial Stout, is delicious. That beer is pretty hard to beat. They've got a lot of good beers, though. Pinner is awesome. Pinner on a hot day, that's their session IPA, one of my faves. Yeah, they've got a lot of really good stuff. So Oscar Blues makes awesome stuff. I want to ask, how's the dad life, and are diapers as bad as they say? Dad life is awesome. I am just super happy with the little dude, Johnny. He is just a really happy baby. He's been extremely easy for my wife and and I think he's made this kind of intro to parenting a lot easier than it could have been, and so I'm extremely thankful for that. Diapers really aren't that bad. At least they haven't been for us, and our kid is very regular. I've changed plenty of poopy diapers at this point, and you get used to it. You get really fast at it. I think I can change a diaper in like less than a minute. So, once you get in the rhythm, it's just another part of life. It's not that big of a deal. The thing that sucks for us is we don't have trash pickup at our house, so we got to take those trash bags to the dump, which that is less fun for sure. But outside of that, diapers aren't that bad. Let's see. Chad Barrymore, make a brewery in the back of my shop. Man, I would love to. It's funny. It's been a dream of mine for many years to open my own brewery. It's always been like the hurdle of that initial crazy capital investment. But that is definitely something I would love to do one day, or at least be part of. I've had even a name picked out since I was probably like 22 for the brewery that I wanted to open myself. So I would love to. Tyler from Gardner, North Carolina. What's going on, fellow North Carolina native? Let's see. So, Abraham, any tool or tools that you couldn't substitute with something you already have that you had to go purchase? I don't know. That's a tough one. I would say the router is a hard tool to do without completely. You can probably get around it, but there's a lot of things the router can do that are just very hard to do otherwise, especially roundovers. I think that's one of the things that the router excels at that almost no other tool can do that effectively. I mean, I guess you could pull out a molding hand plane and put in some sweat equity, but I think the router is one that it would be hard to live without for sure. You can do a whole lot with the router. I mean, one tool that I would have a hard time living without would be the domino, the Festool domino. But you can certainly substitute a lot of things for that tool. But it's one of those tools that the efficiency that you gain having that tool is just crazy. Let's see. Where can I get a zero clearance insert for the DeWalt table saw I used to have from Ricky Clark? Amazon. That's where I found mine. They have a number of zero clearance inserts for it, and that will definitely make that saw a heck of a lot better. The insert that comes with that job site saw is not great. It's got a bunch of room around the blade. It's actually kind of unsafe if you're cutting off thin strips, and you'll get a lot less tear out and that kind of thing. I almost immediately replaced the blade with a better quality, like higher tooth count blade, and then also put in a zero clearance insert, and those two things really made that saw perform extremely well. Also, some good dust collection helps as well. Sonny Gill, what is the best finish for plywood? Oh, lovely. That dang gnat that I've been cursing is now in my beer. That is outstanding. So anyway, best finish for plywood. That's a tough one. I think it really depends what you're going for. I use, where did he go? I use General Finishes products quite a bit. I like spraying finishes, especially on plywood, because it is a big surface area. Got him. Big surface area, so spraying finishes makes life a heck of a lot easier. So if I'm spraying finish, if I want that kind of water white, don't really want any color change like maple plywood or birch plywood, I'll use something like Minwax polyacrylic or General Finishes High Performance. Those two spray extremely well. They also brush on really well if you don't have a spray system. But if I'm using something like walnut veneer plywood or maybe oak plywood, something that I kind of want more of that oil look, I'll usually use something like General Finishes Endurovar, again, for spraying. You could also brush it on, though, and have had a lot of luck with that. I know a lot of us, I know John Malecki swears by that stuff. Shannon from Wood Talk and the Renaissance Woodworker uses a lot of Endurovar as well, but it's very good stuff for sure. Zonda asks, I got a lot of wood chisels from my grandpa, and they seem very dull, and some are rusted. Considering cleaning them up and trying to make them useful again. Yeah, any tips on how to or where to start? I would definitely do that. As long as it's good steel and they have some meat left, you should totally be able to do that. I would recommend my buddy James Wright over at Wood by Wright. He's got a ton of videos on sharpening chisels and kind of bringing chisels back from really rough states. So I definitely go check him out. It's really not that hard. You can remove rust with even something as simple as like white vinegar. Just soak the chisels in white vinegar, and then you can sharpen them with some basic diamond stones or something like that, or even a bench grinder if that's all you have, and get a nice working chisel for sure. So I definitely wouldn't toss them or anything like that. Now I see Brina, she recommended if you soak rusted tools in white vinegar, that will clean them up. Yeah, for sure. Let's see, what else? Sorry, this keeps jumping ahead. I'm trying not to skip anybody. Noah, did I watch Frank's World Cup ball video? Yes, I watch pretty much every Frank Howarth video. He is by far one of my absolute favorite YouTube makers, and his video was amazing. Frank makes projects. In case you guys don't subscribe to Frank Howarth, just go do it immediately. But Frank makes projects that I don't really ever want to build myself, but they come out so nice because the amount of work he puts into his projects is just unbelievable. But yeah, Frank's World Cup ball turned out really, really cool. So time for another beer, y'all. If you're at home, let's see, what time is it? It is 5 o'clock. Perfect. 5 o'clock Eastern, at least. So cheers, y'all, who are watching along at home. This is Hutton & Smith. This is their Pale Ale. Super tasty. This is another one I picked up in Knoxville. This is from Chattanooga, Tennessee. So cheers, y'all. So I Want to Make asks, what do you think about buying cheap tools as you need them while you figure out your style? and what you want to do. Do you think that's a good idea? I do in some cases. There are certain tools any woodworker is going to need a drill, for instance. So I wouldn't cheap out on a drill. And any woodworker is going to need a random orbit sander. So I wouldn't cheap out on that. But there are certain tools you could maybe get away with slightly cheaper versions of, like maybe the jigsaw you don't use as much. But again, if you don't have a bandsaw, a jigsaw is really useful, and having a cheap one is just going to frustrate you. So I'm really not of the mindset to buy super cheap tools. I think probably the cheapest brand I would buy would be Ryobi. I know a lot of people who use their tools with a lot of success. They seem pretty good for the price, and they're very reasonable. But I wouldn't probably go much lower than that price point wise. Let's see. Bearded MTBer asks, when I publish a video, do I add YouTube tags to target who is searching or watching for your content? Yeah, I definitely add tags to every video I put out. Mostly tags are, in the way I use them, just to kind of let Google and whoever's kind of indexing that video let them know what the video is about. So if it's how to build a coffee table, the tags will be coffee table, modern coffee table, furniture, how to build a coffee table, how to build a modern coffee table, things like that. And that way, any of those kind of search combinations, your video will still come up. So let's see. Savar says one of the reasons he's getting back into woodworking after a 10-year hiatus, he sold and gave away all his tools, moved states twice, and one of the reasons is because of my enthusiasm and projects. So that's awesome, man. I love hearing that kind of stuff. If my videos help to inspire people to pick up woodworking and making and welding and all that stuff, that's really cool. That's kind of the goal for sure. So, Tim Walters, Deviant Dales from Oscar Blues. Yeah, that is a good one, man. That's my father-in-law really loves that beer for sure. He's much more of the kind of more malty IPA guy, and so he really digs that one. That's a good one for sure, though. Let's see. All right, Adam is looking into getting a benchtop planer. I've seen great reviews on the Win 12.5-inch planer, to the point that it seems about as good as the one that DeWalt has for $400. Any experience with the Win? No, I've never used any of their tools, but they do seem. Actually, I take that back. My father-in-law has their benchtop drill press, and it seems like a really solid tool. So, the nice thing is you're probably buying it from Amazon. So, if you buy it and use it for a week or two and it's really crappy, you can just box it back up and return it free of charge. So, I think that's fairly low risk. The one thing with that is 12.5 inches versus 13 inches does make a difference. So, that width is the big limiting factor with the planer. So, you might want to think about the 13-inch DeWalt. That's also a much nicer machine than their 12.5-inch. I think it's the DW 735 is the 13-inch, which is the planer I had before the Powermatic. And I don't know the model number on the 12.5-inch, but it is definitely a beefier planer. So that being said, if that's kind of what your budget dictates, then I think the Win would be, I think it would be a winner. No pun intended. Zach and Ellie Vlog said, love the work I've done on Alex's van. Appreciate that. I'm really pumped on the van build. The video is doing crazy well. I think it's like well over 200,000 views at this point, which is nuts after less than a week of being out. But it seems like people are really pretty stoked on that. So, yeah. Taco Bike also has a Festool Domino. Nice, man. So you're a Festool man. That's pretty cool, dude. Let's see. So people are telling me to drink the Nat, more protein. Yeah, I'm good on that one. Francisco, greetings from Santiago, Chile. That's awesome, man. Welcome. Elliot, watching you makes woodwork at school so much better. Keep up the good work. I appreciate that, man. I'm glad it's helpful. Let's see. Les Mina, what's my real name? Johnny Brook. I use it in every video. The Dusty Walnut. I have a few woodpecker's tools. If I could only have one, which would it be? Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't know. Let's look back. It would probably be this guy, the 1281 square. So this is just one of the best squares out there, in my opinion. It's just extremely nice. It's beefy. You know it's accurate. And the nice thing about the 12 inches, you can use it, on narrower boards, but then also if you need, to mark a wider board, obviously 12 inches is nice. The one nice thing about these is they kind of hook over the edge, so it's really easy to know you have a nice firm connection with the edge. So I definitely like this square a lot. Although that TS32 is pretty sweet too, especially if you have a track saw. That is a very, very useful tool. Let's see. Sunny Gill, what is the best way to start a business in woodworking? So that's a tough one. So I would probably start building pieces and then trying to sell them locally because I think that unless you're building smaller like craft items, woodworking is largely a local business because shipping furniture is pretty challenging. It can get very expensive. So unless you're charging a lot of money for your pieces and another $300 $400 of shipping isn't going to be a big deal for them, selling local is going to be the way to go. So that's kind of how I got into it. Really, I was building stuff for my YouTube channel and was posting it on Instagram and had a local person want to buy it, one of the pieces I made. And then they bought a piece, and then their neighbor in their offices ended up finding out about it, and they bought a piece. And so word kind of spreads like that. That local market is, I think, going to be a really kind of good way to go about that. There's one website that I had a lot of success with, and I don't know how much they're doing with it anymore, but it's called custommade.com. Basically, people who want custom furniture can put like listings up there of what they need and you can bid on them. And so that's really nice. You can find people who are kind of in your geographic area and then put in a bid for the project, and if they like it, then they pay you for it and you build it and all is good. So that's a really nice way to connect the buyer with the builder, because sometimes that's kind of the hardest part is people know they want a custom piece of furniture, but they don't know how to find that right person. So yeah, I would definitely get involved on social media, especially I think Instagram and Facebook are good for kind of your local areas. But then, if there are craft fairs locally that you can go display your furniture at, if there are local art galleries that you can display your furniture, those are all good ways to kind of, I think, build your following and audience. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to sort through the chat here. I really need somebody to help me with this because it is like crazy. Um, Worth effort. What's going on, man? I met him in Oklahoma. So, what's your most frustrating task in tool maintenance? That is a tough one. I'm not particularly fond of sharpening personally. A lot of my hand tools are quite dull because of that. So, I guess sharpening because I just don't feel super competent at it. I finally have kind of a new sharpening setup. I've got a few diamond plates and a leather strop, and then the Veritas jig for sharpening at specific angles. There's another gnat in here. Anyway, so I think once I get those dialed in, I'll feel a lot more confident. But probably sharpening, because otherwise I just don't feel like I have to do a ton of tool maintenance really. I mean, occasionally I just had to kind of make sure my miter saw was nice and square. I think I just bumped into it a few too many times as I was walking past it. Wax the bed of my planer and jointer, that kind of stuff. But that's pretty easy stuff. So I would say sharpening is one of those things that I don't really look forward to doing. Let's see. So Sonia said she started 2 years ago on woodworking and found out it's very expensive. So she gave up a couple times, but my videos keep popping up, and they make her want to open the shop again. So, yeah, I would definitely. I mean, woodworking doesn't have to be expensive. You can get used tools for pretty reasonable prices, and then depending on the material you're buying and where you're buying it, you can get it for a reasonable price. I mean, the thing is, even if you get all that stuff at good prices, it's always going to be hard to beat the prices of places like IKEA and things like that at the end of the day. But just know that building the stuff yourself, one, you're going to get this huge sense of satisfaction out of it, but two, most likely it's going to last a lot longer because it's going to be better quality materials. So, rather than having a shelf last 2 years and like one move, it'll maybe last 20 years. So you got to think of it as a long-term investment there. So, all right. So I'm going to answer a couple more questions. We're at 5:10. Let's give it maybe another 10 minutes and then close it out. So let me see. Let me get a couple more questions here. Let me skip down. So yeah, we don't have a ton left. Let's see. Okay. India and Jalen, have I ever built a bed frame? If not, could I do a video on one? I've done one with Chris Salmoni over at Four Eyes Furniture. I did the headboard and he did the bed frame, so you can go check that out. But I also am definitely planning on building a replacement for our IKEA bed frame in our master bedroom. It's a king size bed, which makes things more tricky because everything's just massive. But I definitely have that on my list of things to get to in the next few months. So stay tuned for that. So Ricky Clark, I think I already answered your question on the zero clearance insert. I would definitely look on Amazon. They have the DeWalt zero clearance inserts available for sure. Phoenix Rising, have I ever mountain biked with Seth or single track sampler? Yep, I've mountain biked with both of those dudes. They both left me in the dust, but they do it for a living, and I do woodworking for a living, and I'm a better woodworker than them, so I think it all evens out. But yeah, they're both super talented riders, and I have a lot of fun, a lot of fun riding with them. So let's see. Let's get one last question. Francisco, what is the computer program that I use to design my projects? So that would be Google SketchUp. I guess it's not even Google anymore. It got bought by, I think, Trimble is the company. But anyway, SketchUp. It's free. I think maybe it's only free for the web-based software now, but you might be able to find the desktop-based software still out there. But it's really effective for what I do. So there's definitely a learning curve. It's a little bit finicky in some ways, but once you figure out what you're doing, it's super useful. I can mock up a piece of furniture in an hour or so, and that's just starting with nothing but just a design in my head. And then the nice thing is there's this cut list extension for SketchUp that will then, as long as you've created all your components correctly, it'll spit out a super well done cut list. And also, if you're using cheat goods, it'll lay out the pieces efficiently on those sheets of plywood so you know how to break them down. So those functionalities alone are the only reason I have not switched to Fusion 360, because I don't think they have the equivalent over there quite yet. So I like SketchUp quite a bit, and definitely would recommend that. But let's see. Yeah, I think. Yeah, so it looks like JBait still has the link to the free SketchUp exe file. So yeah, for sure. So, all right, guys. Well, I think I'm going to close it out. Oh, Hand Tool Rescue. You just asked what I'm drinking. Hutton & Smith, the Good Schist. It's pale ale. So, cheers, man. Your channel. Talking about blowing up, dude. Holy crap. Hand Tool Rescue. If you guys haven't followed him or subscribed to him, definitely go check him out. He's doing really good work over there. But anyway, thanks to everybody who joined the chat here. This is a lot of fun. Again, I'm just going to try to do these kind of on the weeks where I don't have a build video. Just kind of stay in touch with you guys. And yeah, so until next time, thanks for watching, everybody. And I guess happy building.